Hello and welcome to our program Where God Weeps, a program where we talk about the situation of the suffering church around the world. Today we have a very special guest, the Apostolic Vicar of Arabia, Bishop Paul Hinder. Bishop Hinder is Swiss-born, lives in Abu Dhabi, and is responsible for the largest Catholic territory in the world, covering some 3 million square kilometers. In this area, there are approximately 2 million Christians. Welcome, Your Excellency, and thank you for being here today with us on our program.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you.
I want to give a context of the situation. What countries are we talking about when we're speaking about the Arab states?
When we are speaking about the region where I'm working, then for my Apostolic Vicariate of Arabia, we understand 6 countries. That means the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Qatar. And then there is another Apostolic Vicariate in Kuwait, which is it's also part of the Arabian Peninsula.
It is often said that there are very few, if any, Christians in this area. Can you tell us a little bit about the Christian presence in these Arab states?
Of course, it is true in the sense that there are no local Christians, and that makes the difference to the other states we are speaking about during this synod, like Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Iraq, Palestine, and so on, Jordan. We have no local Christians, but we have a lot of Christians, especially Catholics, migrants from all over the world, especially from the Philippines and from India, but practically from all countries of the world.
But these would be temporary workers. They would have a visa and then they would return.
Yes, that is right. Most of them are only for a relatively short time there, although there are quite a lot of people also who are there for 30, 40 years, or even the second generation who tries to get a job there too. Yeah.
How would you characterize this church? Is it a catacomb church?
Catacomb church is maybe a little bit exaggerated.
It's a big word.
It's a big word. It is true for some parts, for example, for Saudi Arabia, partly maybe even in other countries of the peninsula. But it is a church which is, first of all, a pilgrim church, because from the faithful who arrived yesterday or this morning to the bishop who is the shepherd of the flock, all are migrants, all need a temporary permit to live there. And of course the public worship is limited.
So there's freedom of worship, but not freedom of religion.
The freedom of religion in the sense of the human rights is not given, or at least not fully given, because there's no question that the Muslim citizen could become a Catholic or Christian or change anyway the religion. But we are free, at least in some countries, to exercise or to practice our own faith.
But within the church compound, for example, evangelization is not possible.
Evangelization in the sense of mission work towards the others, especially Muslim, is not allowed, strictly forbidden. Yeah.
You would be asked to leave.
I think so. I haven't made the test, but I know from others that they are very, very sensitive. I could give you examples how fast they react if there is the slightest attempt or something that could seem to be an attempt for proselytizing.
How are the relations of the Christians with the Muslim community? I know it's a big question because you have 6 states that you're speaking about, but is there a way that you could characterize this relationship?
Actually, in the situation we are living, I would say it's more a living beside than with, because of the civil situation of the social situation of the people who are living there. Christians are doing their job. They are migrants among other migrants. In some countries, they are a large majority of the population, and they have, I would say, professional relationship to Muslims, but in the ordinary life of the day, they preferably have relationship with their own people or within their own religion, maybe, in the church.
There's very little interaction between...
I would say there's generally little interaction, except for those who professionally have to do it.
But I wonder if this isn't as much a problem of, as you've been mentioning, the fact that these are migrant workers, whereas in other countries in the Middle East, these are Arab Christians, so they're
exactly
from the land.
That is a big difference between these two realities. And it has surely also to do that our people normally do not speak Arabic, or not well Arabic, including the bishop, because I have been planted there. I didn't expect that. So that is also a point why the interaction is not so easy, especially with religious leaders. An imam in one of our countries doesn't necessarily know English, and then you have the problem of the translation.
Of the language.
Yeah, of the language, yeah.
I want to take a step back. You mentioned that you were planted there. Was it a shock for you when you were asked to go to Arabia?
I was under a shock when I knew for the first time that there was a serious candidate. That was the difficult time. The moment when I was appointed was no more a surprise, but before, because it was a long process and it was not so easy to find a candidate for this seat in Abu Dhabi.
If I might be very presumptuous, what characteristics did they decide that you would fill the perfect, or you would be the person that they would ask?
Obviously, that you would have to ask the Apostolic Nuncio and the prefect of the congregation, or maybe the Holy Father himself, who passed already to the other side, because it was John Paul II who appointed me.
Very
but
good.
I think one of the reasons was surely I was member at that time of the General Council of the Capuchin Order, which is in charge of the Arabian mission, as we called it, at least in the past. And I was within the General Council also in charge of the Capuchins of the Middle East. So I had a slight idea about the reality. Then it should be normally a European, because of the facility to travel within the different countries. For someone from the Philippines, for example, for India, it might be a little bit more difficult than for me. Then could be that at the end, but I was surely at the end of the whole list, but being a Swiss citizen could be in this situation a positive thing, the experience of a multicultural country, at least multilinguistic country, and you need someone there who has an understanding that not everybody is only from one culture or from one country.
If I might pursue, just one more question. What was your greatest shock when you landed and started to work? What was the greatest cultural challenge that you had to overcome?
That was precisely the language, because I was quite familiar with, of course, with German, with Italian, with French. English was not my language. And to be obliged practically from one day to the other to speak, to preach, to write in English was a heavy burden at the beginning. And especially, I never during my life before I had to speak and to preach so often as I have to do now. So it was really a challenge. And it is, because you have never the same freedom as you have in your mother tongue, or at least in a language which was familiar to you since youth.
Your Excellency, you have achieved a sort of a breakthrough in the sense that you have helped and worked towards the introduction of the first Catholic Church in Qatar. and this is historic. Can you tell us, how did this come about?
Yeah, the merits are not mine. I think here I due a lot to my predecessor, Bishop Mark Riedemann, who has done a marvelous work during 29 years. Practically all the existing churches in the different countries either built by him or have been renovated by him. Then to the people who were there in Qatar, who worked hard for this achievement.
The local
the local Catholics, some ambassadors, they had to work during many, many years and to prepare the ground until it was possible. I could earn the fruits from people who had put the seed before.
Your Excellency, we have some footage of that historic day, the opening of the church in Qatar, and we're going to take a short break to watch a report on this extraordinary event.
On the 15th of March, more than 10,000 Catholics celebrated the first Mass in the Church of the Virgin of the Rosary, the first Catholic church built in Qatar since the 7th century. Although it was a Saturday, a workday in the country, and the road to the church isn't yet finished, faithful of all ethnic groups crossed the desert to worship in the new church. After passing through security, Bishop Paul Hinder, a Swiss Capuchin, welcomed the faithful. Cardinal Ivan Diaz, prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of the Peoples, presided at the Mass, which was celebrated by 4 bishops and 50 priests. Cardinal Diaz represented the Pope and thanked Qatar for what he called this great gift. Song and dance from Qatar's various immigrant communities provided music and colour at the ceremony. 100,000 Catholics currently live in the country and mainly come from India, the Philippines, Sri Lanka and Pakistan. The church has been built on a piece of land given by Qatar's Emir, Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani. The gift was part of the country's social and economic modernization. The Emir is the founder of Al Jazeera, an influential Arab television network that also filmed the ceremony. The church can hold 5,000 people and has been funded through 20 years of donations made to the charity Aid to the Church in Need. The Qatar authorities insisted on 2 conditions: no religious symbols on the outside of the church and no bells. The evening before the Mass, the building was officially inaugurated by Qatar's Deputy Prime Minister, Abdullah bin Hamad Al Attiyah. At the end of the ceremony, he called the new church a positive message for all the world, and he compared it to mosques built in the West. The Vatican wants this to be an example to the Middle East. In particular, it wants Qatar's great neighbour, Saudi Arabia, to recognize religious freedom and authorize the construction of churches on its soil. Today, more than 2 million Christians live in Arabia, including Catholics, Copts, the Orthodox and Protestants. All of them are immigrants in the sacred land of Islam.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our program Where God Weeps. It's my great pleasure to be speaking with the Apostolic Vicar of Arabia, Bishop Paul Hinder. Your Excellency, thank you for being with us again here on our program.
Thank you.
As we have just witnessed in our program, you have worked together with many others for the construction of a church which I think carries some, or contains some 2,700 faithful, roughly
Yes,
about this, the possibility. What sign of hope is this for you?
Yeah, of course it is extraordinary for Qatar because the situation before was similar as we still have it in Saudi Arabia. And it is simply a kind of, it's not only a kind, it's a sign of hope for the Christians living in that country. I still remember on that day myself, I was really in emotion, and I saw people crying of joy to see finally that they have their church, their, let's say, living room for their faith. And that is something which is very important, to have this point of reverence also visible, where people can gather and celebrate without being at risk.
Although the outside of the church there are no religious symbols allowed, so it's still within certain parameters. Having said that, however, what sign is this for the larger region in the Middle East? That there is a possibility to build a church in an Arabian country. Is this also a sign of hope for the Christians in the wider region?
Yeah, we have to see that in other countries we had churches already since many years. I remind Bahrain, the Kingdom of Bahrain, where we had a church already built in 1939, or in the late 60s and then 70s in the United Arab Emirates, in different emirates, or also in the Sultanate of Oman. Without speaking about the very first church on the peninsula in the modern times in Aden, where the whole mission began in the 19th century.
But I guess in this climate where there's increasing fundamentalism, increasing tensions between the two communities, this is nonetheless a positive sign.
Sure, that is true. And it's not only, it shows the openness and the generosity of the emir, respectively of the ruling families, but it is also a sign that they would like to open more, to be more tolerant, to be more adequate to the reality that exists in the countries, because there are hundreds of thousands of migrants also in the state of Qatar, and although we do not know exactly the number of the Christians, but there in the whole country of the Catholics there must be around 200,000. Only the Filipino population already alone is close to that, and there are many Indians. So for all of them, of course, it is something extraordinary to have at least this point of events where they can go. Although, of course, for many it's still a problem because it might be too far away. They have to do long ways to go to the church. But at least for the population in the capital, Doha, it is really a success.
I want to come back to this question of the increasing radicalization between the two communities of Christian and Muslim, and we're here at the Middle East Synod, and a lot of the conversation has been devoted to how to reconcile, how to work forward together with the Muslim community. One proposal was a so-called positive secularism, which is the idea of, I suppose, moving towards this idea of the separation of state and faith. How do you see this from your understanding of the Arabian culture and the Gulf of Arabia? Is this a reality? Is this a possibility or not?
First of all, I would like to say, of course, when we are speaking about fundamentalism, that is not generalized to generalize for all the Muslims. Of course, there are fundamentalistic tendencies of different kinds in the whole Muslim world, as we have also fundamentalism even in the Christian world. What will be the future in this regard? I simply do not know. It is clear that for the Muslim world, the step towards what we know with secularization or laicity is a very, very big step, and not so easy. It was not easy for us, but it may be even more difficult for them, for the simple reason. I would like to make a comparison. Jesus Christ didn't come and found a state. He didn't come with military forces. He hadn't, let's say, a social political project. That came 300 years later in the Christian world when Constantine opened the possibility. The first 300 years, we were not existent as a political force. While the birth of the Islam is very, very close connected also to a political and military project. And so I don't think that it will be so easy to overcome this mark, this label which is connected to the beginning of the Islam. I don't say it is impossible, because I think even in the Quran there are elements that can be interpreted for a further development and also for a more tolerant society regarding the other religions. But unfortunately there are also other texts, and especially on the tradition of the Islam doctrine, we have partly very heavy stumbling blocks for this open development. Fortunately, there are within the Muslim world quite a lot of people who are working in that sense, but I think it will still take a time.
In the direction of moderate
Yes.
and cooperation.
Yes. If you see only, let's take the Turkey, which is an official like state, but it's not so easy even there for the Christians, because the whole social life, the mentality is still marked, even in this like state, by this, I would say, Muslim Islamic groundation.
What is your hope for the Gulf? What is your hope for the Catholic Church in the Gulf of Arabia?
Yeah, my hope, first of all, is that they can live without fear and with a little bit more space and tolerance as we have now, especially in certain countries. They don't need to hide most of the countries. Just to give you an example, there is no problem if someone in Abu Dhabi or in Dubai has the rosary with the cross on the mirror of the car and so on.
It is possible or not?
Yeah, that is possible.
It is possible.
Yeah, that is. In some countries there is no major difficulties for that. But that makes not a life. I think that we should be more free in organizing the whole Christian life in a better way. Now, sometimes we are really forced to do everything in a minimum. We have just a possibility to give the catechism to the children, we have just the possibility to offer the necessary masses, and even there we have not sufficient space, and to do a little charitable work on a private basis. But as soon as you would like to have a few schools, and that's not so easy because the conditions for the schools are getting more and more narrow in a certain sense, or more demanding.
More difficult.
That we could more develop in a more free space also all our needs to organize, to have associations, or for example a public caritas, or even to have a hospital. Why not? That's not possible now, because immediately when you would like to go to an institution, you have to face the Sharia, which is practically the private law of the respective countries. You need a local sponsor, and then the sponsor legally has to have at least 51% of the ownership and so on. So you have a lot of limitations which make the things sometimes difficult for an institution like the church. We are not the only ones who are suffering of that. Every institution is faced with similar problems. Only for us it's more problematic, even especially when we come to the employees, because more and more they're asking that a certain percent of the employees have to be locals. Now, among the locals, there are no Christians, so you can see the consequences that would have.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for having been with us today in our program.
Welcome.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having been with us today on Where God Weeps. And if you'd like to know more about the situation facing Christians in the Gulf, I would encourage you to look at the contact information at the end of this program. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.